Hey guys, welcome to my January wrap-up and February TBR. 2015 has already started out really nicely. I read like 6 books, 6 physical books, I think like 6 audiobooks, a couple graphic novels, so it's been a really good month. I'll go through the physical books first. The very first thing that I finished reading in January was Song of Susanna, the 6th book in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. This was great. I've said this every single time I show one of these books from the series. I love the series so much. Overall, it's bringing this series into a place that I'm like really happy with, and I can't wait to finish it and to do the full series review that I've been talking about ever since I started the series. The next 2 books I read in January were Steelheart and Firefight by Brandon Sanderson. First 2 books in the Reckoner series. I read Steelheart in a couple days, and Firefight I read in less than 24 hours. I really like these. I think they're really hard to put down. They're really hard to stop reading. I really like them. I think compared to Brandon Sanderson's other work, these ones are a bit lackluster. I had a lot of issues with the writing, especially in Steelheart, because it just seemed really clunky. I just think that overall the series as a whole not necessarily as good as everything else he's written, but I still really like it. I give them both like 3.5 stars, I think. I read the first volume of Saga several months ago. I wasn't like as blown away by it as other people have been, or have said that they've been. I gave it like a 4 to 5 stars when I first read it. I reread it again, and then went ahead and reread the second one and the third one, and I'm really glad I finally did that, because I really love the series. Like with graphic novels, I think it's very difficult for me to feel invested in them. In the first one, I just didn't really feel anything necessarily, but as I got through the second one and the third one, I really loved all the characters, all the things that were happening. I love the story. It's a lot of fun, and I'm definitely going to get the 4th one. I still don't want to like go out and get it just yet, but I am really looking forward to continuing this. I think it's just a lot of fun. Then I read the first book in the Analane Book of the Fallen series by Steven Erikson, Gardens of the Moon. This book, okay, so everyone that's read this book will tell you that this book is very confusing. This whole series is very confusing, very complex, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and that is definitely true. I really like this a lot. I gave it like 4 stars, I think 4 to 4.5, something like that. I really liked it. I think the thing about it is it just takes a while to really get used to characters, the setting, the sort of different things that are going on within the plot, and the writing itself. The writing itself is a little bit strange. I'll get to that in a second. I really liked the characters after I finally like understood who they were and what they were doing. I liked the plot and the story, and the more I understood what the heck was going on, I think about halfway through it really clicked with me what was happening. This book as a whole just takes some getting used to, and I think the writing is really good. There are always these little epigraphs before every single chapter, and I think these are especially beautiful, very well written. The book itself is well written. It's written in a kind of confusing way. It's hard to explain. The dialogue, I think, kind of lost me sometimes, because the dialogue is very strange. The way characters talk isn't necessarily very realistic, but I liked it. It kind of grew on me the more and more I read it, and by the end I really liked it. I really liked how it ended. I feel like this one has barely scratched the surface of what this world can be, what the magic in this world can be, what the characters are going to be. I'm sure there's going to be a ton more characters introduced in the next one, many more different plot lines. Like I can't even imagine where it's going to go from here. Basically, it's about this empire called the Malazan Empire. They have taken control. A lot of this book takes place in one specific city that is not a part of the empire yet, and that the empire wants to make a part of the empire. But the people of that city are very resistant, and that's kind of the very basic plot of what is going on. We follow people on different sides, on sides that have nothing to do with those two sides, sides on the outside that are against the empire, that are helping the empire, whatever. There's just a lot of different people in this that are a part of the plot, but aren't necessarily the focus of it. Overall, if you're going to start reading the series, I definitely suggest you plan on being sort of lost for a little while. You will eventually understand what's happening and why and where it's going, at least in this one, and then in the next one I have no idea what's going to happen. The next book I finished in January was A Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge. This is the first book in his Zones of Thought series. This book is a hard sci-fi book. Takes place within the Milky Way galaxy, but there are these things called the Zones of Thought. The way I can explain it is basically the farther out you get from the center of the galaxy, the higher you go, the more technologically advanced you're capable of being, your society, your world is capable of being. There's the unthinking depths, which it's just impossible for any like civilized like society to live there. It's uninhabitable basically. Then there's the slow zone, where technology is possible, but it's not quite as much as like the beyond, which is above that. The beyond has way more technological advances. They're capable of more technological advances. And then there's a place that even above the beyond that societies can transcend to. And all of this is not like the focus of the book. That's just like the galaxy in which it takes place. The actual story follows this family that gets stranded on a world that's in the slow zone. This sort of primitive world where the inhabitants are basically packs of dogs. It's really interesting, and I really love this world a lot. This family lands there, is stranded there. They're kind of separated, and there's this war going on between these two different sides to the war, and the family is split between them. They kind of become like the focus of the war because of how new they are to the people that live on this planet. This planet is just, it has almost no technological advances, and stuff that the people that land there can bring to them is just really enticing to them. There are these packs of dogs. They're all in these groups of like 4 or 5 or 6, but they're all act and have the consciousness of one person, and they basically share one mind. They all have one like combined name that they're referred to as. There's this one pack called Peregrine. He usually has 4 in his pack, but they all share the one mind Peregrine. They all are that one person, and if one like dies or gets killed, then they can bring in a new one and keep living in that way. And because of that, there are certain packs that have been living for a very long time. Whenever one dies, they just bring in another puppy, and they keep on living as a person. It's just that the pack changes throughout time. It's a really interesting world. It's a lot of fun to read about. I really like that a lot. But then on the other side of the galaxy, there's this thing called Relay. Relay is like a hub for the known net, which is like a way for all the different societies to connect with one another. And there's this girl living on Relay called Ravna. She's a human, and she eventually ends up having to like race across the galaxy to try and help the family that's been stranded on this world. There's this weird transcendent being that kind of got created by one human society that's sort of taking over everything, destroying everything that they have to figure out how to stop. There's just a lot of different cool things going on in this book, and I really, really loved it a lot. It's probably one of my new favorite books. I suggest everyone go out and read this because I loved it. It won a Hugo Award, and I can definitely see why. The last physical book I read in January was Lord Fowl's Bane, the first book in the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, The Unbeliever by Stephen R. Donaldson. This book was pretty difficult to read a lot of the time because the main character, Thomas Covenant, is basically an awful person. He's self-centered, very selfish, very self-loathing, self-pitying, just pissed off in general a lot of the time. Does some pretty awful things within the first 100 pages of the book. Okay, so basically he's taken from our world. In our world, he is a leper. There was a time when lepers would be kind of put into their own little community where they could just live with among other lepers, and they didn't have to live among normal society. Basically, everybody in the world around him acts like they hate him and treat him accordingly. Feels very alone, but he's also like, he's kind of trained himself to really focus on his life, on the reality of his life. This is the reality of the situation. He cannot fantasize about there ever being a time where he will not be a leper. That kind of becomes the sort of monster inside that everybody sees him as. And then he's sort of taken away from our world and brought into this new world called the Land. And in the Land, he believes that he's dreaming. He doesn't really believe that it's real. He's brought there by this evil guy named Lord Fowl. Lord Fowl kind of gives him this message to give to this Council of Lords. And Thomas Covenant has no idea why he's been given this message, why he has to do this, and he doesn't really care about it. But he goes off and talks to some of the people that live in the Land, tells them what Lord Fowl told him, and I mean, he doesn't really want any part of it, but basically he's led from place to place all over the Land in order to reach this Council of Lords to figure out what to do. He has no desire to be a part of this narrative, but he kind of, at the same time, he follows it anyway. I wrote a little review about this when I finished it. I'm going to put a link to that in the description, along with all of the other little reviews that I've written on Goodreads for everything that I've read this month, so you can kind of get a better idea of what I'm talking about. But also, it's very well written. For the most part, the writing is good. World building is good. I really like the world this takes place in. The Land is really clear. People that live in the Land really genuinely care about it. They are very genuine people, and kind of the contrast to Thomas Covenant. But a lot of the world building is done through, like, these characters will tell stories about the history of the Land to Thomas Covenant, and that's basically all of the world building is done in that. So there's just these big long stories about the past, about things that have happened, about why things are the way they are or whatever, and they kind of become tedious after a while. I did enjoy it. I can see why people really like it. I can see why people really dislike it. I was kind of in the middle. There's things that I didn't like, there were things that I did like. I think it means to do that, and it means to make you feel kind of the way that people have felt about it. So in that way, it did feel successful to me, and that's why I feel the way I do about it. I'm gonna be reading the next one and seeing where this goes. I don't know who to recommend this to. If any of that sounds interesting to you, then maybe give it a shot. As far as audiobooks go, I listened to the second book in the Cormoran Strike series by J.K. Rowling, or Robert Galbraith, whatever. The Silkworm, I really liked it. I liked it about the same amount that I liked the first one. I think it's just a lot of fun. Maybe like 4 to 4.5 stars, something like that. I love the main character, Cormoran Strike. I love his sort of sidekick, Robin. Detective mystery kind of thing. Cormoran Strike is a detective. In this one, this writer has written this manuscript. The manuscript is like really dirty and sort of vile, and it sort of insults everybody in the writer's life. And I really like sort of seeing into that manuscript, seeing into how it connects to the characters we meet, that Cormoran Strike meets and talks to throughout the book. And overall, that manuscript being a part of the story really added a lot to it, I think. There are certain things I really liked about this one that I think improved over the last one, but as a whole, I liked them pretty much equally. I also listened to the audiobooks for the first two bind-ups in the Auraria Revelations series by Michael J. Sullivan. This is Theft of Swords and Rise of Empire. I buddy read both of these. I really liked both of them a lot. The first one was sort of very simple. It goes with a lot of sort of fantasy tropes like elves and dwarves and magic, but I feel like it really did take those things and make them its own. I really like the two main characters, Hadrian and Royce. Throughout most of it, we barely get any perspective from Hadrian and Royce, and it's very weird because we basically see them mostly through the lens of other people, and really, like, we don't really get a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts from people. Mostly people talk to each other and then do actions, so that sort of changes as the books go on. We kind of see into the perspectives more, and in the second book, in the second bind-up, we really get to see from Hadrian and Royce's perspective. The stories are very quickly paced because of that. They're very easy to read, they're very fun to read, they're very difficult to stop listening to, like while I was listening to them. The audiobook narrator for these books is phenomenal. I love the way he narrates it. One of my favorite narrators that I've listened to so far. So if you're going to read these, I definitely suggest the audiobooks if you're into audiobooks. I think they've steadily improved over the course of them, all around like 3.5 to 4 stars for me. But then the fourth book, which is called The Emerald Storm, which is in the second bind-up, was really, really good for me. It really worked for me a lot. I really loved it a lot. I loved what it did for the world. We got to see a lot of different parts of the world in this one. We got to see from Hadrian and Royce's perspective way more, and just a lot of stuff that happened really worked well for me. Like Hadrian and Royce went on a ship and kind of became a part of the crew on the ship, and I really liked that a lot. Another one of the main characters, Arista, has really grown a lot in the series, and I think she's one of my favorite characters as well. I really like all the characters in this book. I like the writing. It's very fun, like I said, very easy, and I definitely suggest you give it a shot. I also listened to the second book in the Southern Reach trilogy, Authority by Jeff Vandermeer. This one I didn't like anywhere near as much as the first one. This one was very bland to me. I didn't really like the narrator. They follow completely different characters. The first one follows a completely different character than the second one, and the second one's story is very, very, very different from the first one. I think I gave it like 2.5 stars. I am going to be finishing the series with the last book, Acceptance, because I want to see how it all ties together. Maybe reading the third one will make me appreciate the second one more. And I also listened to Let's Explore Diabetes with Owls by David Sedaris. I've only ever read one thing by David Sedaris, that is When You Were Engulfed in Flames, and I really liked it a lot. This was very different from everything else I read this month. It was good. I didn't necessarily like it as much as When You're Engulfed in Flames, but David Sedaris is really funny, and listening to him do the audiobook was really great because he has a great voice and like really knows how to read his stories. I mean, some of the stories are kind of hit and miss. A lot of the stories are very similar to one another. There's these certain stories that were like not from his perspective, but from someone else's perspective, and it was kind of a satirical look at this perspective that you can tell he very much disagrees with. And there's a lot of those kinds of stories in there. While I liked them, and I definitely thought they're well done, and I agreed with like the thing they were trying to say, thought that they're a little bit too abundant. Overall, though, it was funny, and I did enjoy it. I like David Sedaris' writing, and I like his sense of humor. And the last thing that I listened to was The Magicians by Lev Grossman. This book, I had a hard time with this, rating it and figuring out like how I felt about it. The main character, Quentin, I started off really connecting to him, really liking him. And he basically kind of finds himself being taken to this school for magic with a bunch of other really smart people that are basically just like him to learn magic, and then we skip over like 5 years worth of time. You stay at the school for 5 years when you go, and we read the entire first half of the book is like the entire 5 years he's there. And it's very difficult for me to connect with things that happen that quickly over that amount of time. I didn't really feel any connection towards any of the characters, towards what was going on in the story. I just didn't really feel anything for it. But then they leave the university, and that's when they kind of all became really insufferable. All of the characters are just really disillusioned, like Quentin especially. Basically throughout his entire growing up, he'd read this series about this magical world called Fillory, and he's always thought to himself, if only he could go to Fillory, his life would be so much better. If only magic were real, life would be so much better. But now that he's gone to this school, he's learned this magic. The magic was really hard to learn all this time at school. He just has no idea what direction he's going in now. He just doesn't know what to do with himself. Magic is real, and it doesn't make him any happier. And I think it deals well with the fact that it's very difficult to find happiness if you're only going to look towards external things to make you happy instead of finding inner happiness, and how hard it is to find inner happiness. Like, I get that not everybody changes, not everybody moves on from all this stuff, but I really do feel like Quentin has learned enough to change a little bit, to grow as a person a little bit. That's mostly my problem with it. No one grew as a person, no one learned from their mistakes, no one's learned from anything yet. What all these characters feeling is not necessarily as realistic as it's supposed to be. I feel like a lot of the stuff that they go through, a lot of stuff that they think and do, the actions that they do really are forced on them by Lev Grossman, who's trying to send a sort of message, or trying to fit everything that happens within this message he's trying to send, this thing he's trying to say. I mean, I wrote a whole bunch of stuff about this on my little review on Goodreads, so once again, there'll be a link to that down below if you want to know more thoughts, but that's my general idea. I'm still going to read the next book and see what happens. So there are two other things that started in January. That is Dark Tower by Stephen King. This is the last book in the Dark Tower series. This is the first thing I'm going to finish in February. I'm also listening to A Deepness in the Sky, the second Zones of Thought book by Werner Vinge. I'll be finishing that. Whenever I finish the Dark Tower, by the way, I'm going to start reading the Dark Tower graphic novels. I have 4 of them right now, so I'm going to read these 4 and then see if I want to get the other ones after I'm done. I really want to read this. It should be really quick. The Ocean of the Analane by Neil Gaiman. It's very, very short, very small. I feel like I can get through this pretty quickly. I'm also going to read the second book in the Malice and Book of the Fallen series, Dead House Gates. I'm really looking forward to seeing where the heck this goes. There's like way more characters in this one than there were in the first one, which is a little bit nerve-wracking, but I'm really excited to see where this goes. Then I'll also be reading the second book in the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever, which is the Illith War. And I'm also going to be reading The Mirror Empire by Cameron Hurley. I've been following Cameron Hurley on Twitter recently, and I'm following her blog posts, and I really liked a lot of stuff she posts. So I mean, I bought this without having read anything else that she's written or any other things that she's said or whatever. But her as a person is really interested in me, and her as an author is really interested in me. Some of the things she's talked about on her blog, on her website, and on Twitter and everything has made me want to pick this up sooner than maybe I would have before. And then separate from the fantasy stuff I'm going to be reading, I'm going to try to read Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut and Great Expectations by Charles Dickens to kind of get through some of the Vonnegut and the Dickens that are on my shelf. I'll also be listening to a few audiobooks. The third bind-up in the Auraria Revelations series by Michael J. Sullivan. The third one is called Heir of Nove Ron. Listening to this on audiobook, buddy reading it with the same people I buddy read the other ones with. I'll be buddy reading Station 11 with some of the people in my buddy reading group. I'll also be listening to the audiobook for The Martian by Andy Weir. I've heard so many good things about this recently. I'll also be listening to and buddy reading The Magician King, which is the second book in the Magician's trilogy. Hopefully it's an improvement. I've been told that it's an improvement, so hopefully I like it a little bit better. Hopefully it works a little bit better for me. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I think as far as anything else goes, I'm not entirely sure what else I'll listen to, what else I'll read. I'll just get through all this stuff and see if I have any time left for anything else. But yeah, that's everything that I read in January, everything I'm going to be reading in February. If you've read any of this stuff, if you have any opinions on anything that you want to share with me, feel free to do so. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon with more.